Well, hello everybody. This is going to be a little bit of a different video. Many of you know that I've been fascinated with the topic of circumcision and foreskin restoration for many years. And in the course of my research into that topic, I've met lots of colorful characters. And at one point, one of the main problems we have with the topic is that there's this experiential divide between men who are cut and men who are uncut. And it's very difficult for us to really understand what the differences are because we don't have a point of reference. So it's really useful when you can meet people who have experienced have had sexual experiences when they were uncircumcised and then when they're circumcised, and even more rare than that is somebody who's done both and then also restored their foreskin and have tried out all three in sexual maturity. So this is a man, Dan, who I met on a restoration forum several years ago, and we've kind of had a dialogue going for all this time. And I asked if he would be willing to talk about his experiences uh, for my channel, and he was gracious enough to say yes. So, Dan, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Hey, Dan.
Hello, Dave.
Hey, how's it going?
Pretty good.
So, why don't you go ahead and just kind of walk through your biography here in terms of circumcision, restoration, and all that, just so people have an overview, and then I'll ask some follow-up questions.
Okay. Well, briefly, I'm a 56-year-old male living in Arizona, and Arizona is a predominantly Latino state. I mean, we border right next to Mexico, so we've got lots of folks who live here from there. It's not common for Mexican males to be circumcised, whether they are born in Mexico or typically born in Arizona, and I was one of those who was not. Should have probably considered it a blessing, but growing up, it was challenging for me. I mean, once they started to, and then I grew up at a time where physical education was required, and so were the showers. So I started to, obviously, entering high school, started to really recognize that I was different than the majority of the people, and that became a goal. So by the time I was able to afford to do the procedure myself, I chose to do that at age 21, and at that point was pretty pleased that I had it done. The unfortunate piece was a good 6 to 8 years after that, I started to experience some of the damage that is caused by having that skin removed. So I didn't really learn about restoration until 2012. Yeah, it was 2012. And I spent the better part of 5 years just kind of going through a restoration process that I was fortunate. It worked pretty quick for me, even though I still feel like 5 years was a long time in comparison to a lot of people we have met who've really struggled to gain any progress. I felt pretty lucky to kind of recover some of majority of the damage that I caused by getting the disease. So that's kind of where I'm at in a nutshell.
So you've got all these interesting steps, and I'm really kind of fascinated by each one of them. So growing up, probably when you were pretty young, the fact that you were different from other boys maybe didn't occur to you. Do you remember, was there a point when you realized, hey, most guys are cut and I'm not? Do you have kind of an epiphany moment for that, or did you always know?
No, I didn't always know. I really didn't notice it until really into high school. I mean, I kind of suspected that I was different younger than that, only because, you're with your friends, you go to the bathroom, you're at a urinal, you see, I mean, you're not staring, but you still see.
It's hard not to notice.
You're not, you're not quite sure what it is, you just recognize some differences, but when you're a kid, you're focused on playing, so you know what, you just go do your business, and you go play, and you're back to whatever the activity was, and I didn't really, it was something I saw, but not something that I cared enough to ask about, or probably wasn't even appropriate to be asking questions,
Right.
Like
yeah,
that.
it's taboo topic to really mention it, and also, I mean, this is true even today, and it would have been more true in the past, that any kind of reference to a penis is gonna, trigger, kind of suspicions of homophobia or like, what are you, gay, whatever, if you're asking. So it's difficult to talk about. Did you, so at what point did you become more explicitly aware of what it was and that it had happened to you? Was that?
Well, I think, as a teen, like I mentioned in shower stalls, I started
Now, did you
So,
receive any, were you ever made fun of? Was there any kind of hazing or ridicule that was associated with it, or no? Because that is something that some intact guys will report sometimes. Was that your experience or
yeah,
no?
I've actually met people and had family members who went through that, but I personally never did.
Okay.
I mean, I would get maybe the people that were close to me. You see when somebody looks and sees something that, okay, that's weird. That kind of look, I can't even describe it, but, I had friends do that, but they never said anything, and they never treated me, they never teased me about it in any way. So all of my issues were everything that I just kind of created in my own head, that it was bad, that I was different, or, I was a freak. I honestly, and it's as silly as it sounds, the education on the male body is so bad in the school system, especially in Arizona, that I honestly learned more about my body in my late 40s and 50 when I actually started restoring. It was like, okay, this is just bad that, in this age, and I'm learning more about, how it's supposed to be functioning properly. And those are things we should have learned a long time ago.
So when did it start to get into your head that you wanted to get circumcised? Is that something that started when you were a teen or a little bit later? And what was
I think when I was sexually active, my first girlfriend was pretty accepting of it, but noticed it was different than other people. What was interesting though is, and this is really kind of going off topic, but I never realized I ran into her a few years back. I mean, probably a decade ago, and I hadn't seen her since I was in my 20s. And asked her if she was married and what have you, and then she kind of let me know, and then where she was at and how many boyfriends she tried to have relationships with, and she commented. I don't know what possessed her to comment on this, and I'm just an average size male too. So she commented that the sex that she's had with everybody else has never met up to what we were able to do, and she just found that weird. And then she associated it with the difference being that I had a foreskin and the others didn't. And that she just said that was the only thing that she could see that was different. She said because she'd been with males that were a variety of types.
Yeah, that's actually an anecdote.
Significantly.
That's a common anecdotal. That's a common anecdotal observation. In fact, one of the great Jewish historians, scholars, rabbis, Moses Maimonides, he actually said that Jewish women should avoid contact with Gentile men because Gentile men at that time would be uncircumcised, and that they would enjoy it so much that they would never go back to Jewish men. And he was a doctor. He actually did medical procedures on Gentiles and Jews alike. And his argument for circumcision was that it does reduce sexual pleasure, it reduces sexual function. It's necessary for spiritual reasons, so instead of having fun having sex, you'll concentrate on studying the Torah, so it's good for that reason. But yeah, that's kind of, and there's also a lot of sayings that like American lovers are bad lovers. Like European women say American men are too rough, that they're not sensitive enough, which I suppose some people like, but it's not statistical, there's no studies, but that is a common anecdote, so that's pretty interesting.
Well, it's interesting that you say that too, because my experience with my wife, when I met her, I was already circumcised, and what I noticed over time, because we got married young, I mean, I was 23 when I got married, so it's still pretty new, and things were still functioning somewhat good. I didn't really notice differences, like I said earlier, up until the 6 to 8 year mark. So, my wife commented that once I restored, she recognized, this was her description, she said she felt like our sex life had improved immensely, and she said, I feel like you're just more passionate now, like you're feeling more than just physical. And she said, so that was her take on it. My take on it was I'm performing better, and I just thought, and she said, well, it's not really a performance. She said, but she said it is better. She said, better for both of us, and I think it has more to do with passion. So it's an interesting, description there that, if you're feeling more, obviously, you're going to be more into it, and
right.
that has made a huge difference in what we experience,
so
today.
So just to kind of rewind a little bit, your decision to get circumcised was purely psychological and social. You had no physical problem. You had no complaints
None.
and no complaints in terms of your sexual function or your sexual pleasure. It was clearly you wanted to conform to what you saw as the societal norm.
Correct. It was all cosmetic. It was just to look like everybody else.
And
Absolutely.
you told me that your doctor basically discouraged you. Is that correct?
It is. When I met with the urologist, I started making things up, to say that I had a problem. And I think he was kind of seeing right through it. So he was discouraging the procedure. The challenge was he never told me why. He never gave me a reason why. And I'm one of those people, I need to know why. Otherwise, I'm not buying into it. So he just kept saying, trust me, you don't want to. And I'm like, well, I don't even know you. So how am I going to trust that you know better? So I just was adamant. I just kept making appointments. I feel like I saw him 3 or 4 times before we actually did the procedure. And, he was kind enough, too, to do a procedure, too, that was fairly loose. And once I healed and went for my follow-up appointment, like 2 months after the procedure, I remember being irritated with him, saying, I noticed that there's still skin, over my glands. And I thought, you were going to, cut that off. And he said, trust me, he said, later in life, you're going to appreciate that I did that. He said, but for the time being, if it bothers you, you could just, you can just keep forcing the little bit of skin back. So in the flaccid state, I had skin probably about a 1/4 inch over the corona.
Okay.
So essentially just the tip of the gland was exposed. And only when soft, though. I mean, erect, there was 0 coverage. So he definitely cut quite a bit because unfortunately for me, I hated the look of it because it was excessively long compared to even the people that were intact. I was like, I even looked different than them. So.
Right, that's kind of a middle ground when you have partial flaccid coverage. People aren't sure. Like as a restorer, I can say you start getting people thinking that you're uncut, or uncut guys thinking there's something up. I remember one guy saying you have a really weird foreskin because it's just a degree of coverage that's naturally very, very rare. So, in terms of like sexual pleasure, sexual function, what was there a big difference right after the surgery or in the years follow? Like, what was the progress there?
Well, I didn't really, initially I didn't notice any difference other than, the doctor had to use quite a few stitches. And, like I said earlier, I'm a fairly average individual. And then probably in the flaccid state, you'd probably say small, maybe, I don't know. But I literally had like 30 stitches all the way around. And I've had guys joke with me saying, Jesus Christ, you must be huge. I said, well, no, the stitches were so close together. I mean, it's ridiculous. So when those healed, it was very strange because you know how the skin is kind of like double-sided skin.
Right.
It was very knobby right on the surgery line when the stitches finally fell out. He used dissolvable stitches and they just fell out within 7 to 10 days. And so that whole area was very knobby. So oddly, that added some additional pleasure to my partner, for probably 6-7 months because it stayed, but it didn't smooth out for, probably 6 or 7 months. So, no, I didn't really notice any difference other than I thought maybe I was dealing with some trauma because what I did notice changed was that right after the surgery, during foreplay, I would have challenges of gaining an erection just without foreplay. I mean, there had to be physical contact, and that wasn't the case before surgery.
So when you were intact, just kissing, hugging, stuff that wasn't directly affecting your penis would get you aroused.
Oh my God, yeah. All she had to do was just say something sexual, and it was ready. So yeah, I mean, so it was a huge change for me. I wasn't understanding why that was happening. Made the assumption that maybe it's just right after the procedure, so maybe that'll just come back, and it really never did.
Okay.
No. Actually, the closest thing to coming back was restoring. So now when me and my wife are intimate, it'll usually be, I usually will get a semi, and that never used to happen. So that didn't happen until restoring, so I'm not sure how it's connected, but that's when I noticed it improving.
The main physical difference was just that then the foreplay didn't create the reaction, and you had to have direct physical stimulation of the head. Now, other than that, though, you were pretty happy with it, though, right? You kind of felt.
Yeah, I was, because that seemed to be a bigger priority for me to have it done. So yeah, I was at the time. I was very pleased with getting it done. I just was frustrated that well, I'm having some impact, but I'm not sure what. And I didn't react to it and make a big deal out of it. And I was lucky enough that both the girlfriend I had at the time and then my wife after have always been really good to me about it. They never made me feel badly about myself because that it was functioning that way. But and it took me years to accept it and realize, what, on the bright side, I'm really lucky that I can get and maintain a good erection when I need it, because there's a lot of men who can't do that. So I guess if I had to have some kind of dysfunction, maybe that one's not so bad, because I feel worse for the guys. I've had friends and coworkers who have told me that, I'm good at, getting going, but then I can't keep it. And so that would be really frustrating and mentally, it impacts you mentally.
Yeah, this is an area that I think should be researched more, because we have a lot of problems with erectile dysfunction in the United States that we just assume, well, you're aging. And it's true, people do age, but one wonders, like, do countries like Germany or the UK use as much Viagra as Americans do? And is that a function of the fact that so many American men are missing a part of their dick? I mean, there just seems to be this presumption that couldn't possibly have an effect, but if you think about it logically, how could it not possibly have an effect? You're removing a lot of tissue, it has a function. So, walk me through the process of when you started to notice that you were losing not just the erections from foreplay, but from actual stimulation, from actual, like, it actually becoming less sensitive. Did you notice that happening as the years went by, or?
I did. I feel like I was getting really close to 30 when it was becoming more of an issue.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I'm not the kind of person that's, going to just let it go and not do something about it. So I started meeting with doctors. I mean, I met with multiple physicians to find out what I could do to fix it. And most of them were pretty, you made the decision to get that done. So that pretty much is, a side effect of the decision you made. There's not anything you can do about it.
So you recognize that as a function of being circumcised?
Oh,
right.
Absolutely.
Okay.
What was happening is, you mentioned earlier that there were people commenting about, that American guys have sex too fast. I found myself doing that. I think that we make that effort to go faster and faster because the additional friction
is necessary.
During intercourse makes you feel something a little bit more. So it got to a point, though, that it was so bad that I was finding other ways to please my wife, but the reality is I was speeding through it, and then, I'd get done, and then I'd have to do, various other things to get her pleased, and that was working for us, but it was like a race, and, that just doesn't happen anymore, so it doesn't have to be, a fast process and, intense pounding, because that's what was happening.
I know
and
this
to
is
some degree.
I know this is a difficult question, but if you had to quantify it, how much sensitivity do you think you lost relative to when you were intact? You were talking like a 50%, 20%,
Oh my God, I would say it's a lot higher than that. I would say it's between 80 and 90.
Okay, wow.
So, and what people aren't understanding is the feel that you're losing, because, I feel like when your glands is making contact with the female, you are feeling all over your entire body a sensation, not just in the isolated area of the gland. So as it started to dry up, I could feel the erection, and obviously that felt good, but I couldn't feel anything else. So we get to a point, like, if I pleased her and she had already had an orgasm, I would just stop. And she'd say, "Are you done?" And I'd be like, "No, I can't feel anything." So, and then it turned into her thinking that she was the problem when, in fact, it was me, but I didn't really know it at the time. So I would just stop. I was like, okay, well, she got it off, so I'm good, I'm done. Just frustrated now.
I don't know if this is your experience, but my experience meeting intact men, they don't all say this every time, but a lot of times they do describe, I almost say it's like synesthesia, where they see sparks, and then they feel like tingling like all over their body, their back, their extremities. just from contact with the penis, just from manipulation of the foreskin and the glands, they're saying they're feeling stuff all over, and I'm sitting here like I have no idea like what they are, just like what they're talking about. Like I've been in bed and seen it happen, and people describe it, and yet I just that's something I've never felt, and I don't get it all the time, so I don't know if that's a something that all intact men feel or that's something they feel all the time. But you're kind of describing, when you were intact, did you have sensations like that or no?
Yeah, absolutely. And honestly, restored, it's like that again. So,
Okay.
And I would say, too, I mean, people always ask me, well, when you compare the two, well, clearly being intact is 100% better. But I would say that what I've been able to do restoring is I've got my sexual function and satisfaction in the 90% range.
Okay.
Pretty comfortably. So,
well, walk us through that.
Walk us, I've been able to do.
Walk us through in more detail that decision to restore and how that process kind of went.
Well, this is funny. I was in San Diego on the beach, and Ron Lowe, who is the maker of TLC, happened to be there, and he had I don't know if it was like a sticker or something on the umbrella or whatever, and I thought, I kind of talked to him a little bit about what he did, and then he let me know about the device, and I didn't really understand what he was talking about, so I thought maybe, and then he talked about a video that he had demonstrating, and so I was really confused and a little naive, and so I thought he was referencing a television show on the network TLC.
Yeah, TLC, yeah.
So I started to Google that, but then when I Googled it with his name, obviously his site came up, and then as I started reading more about what he was trying to tell me, maybe more subtly, it clicked for me, and then I was like, okay, is it just by luck that I found this, or was this meant to happen? Because,
yeah, there's not that many Ron Lowe's in the world.
Yeah. So it was kind of cool to be able to just kind of stumble on it, really. So that's how I came to.
Did you decide to restore relatively soon after that, or
I did. I think that was like June. I want to say it was either May or June of 2012, and by July, I had already started the process. I already had a device and started tugging.
Now it sounds like at that point you had already kind of reached the conclusion that the circumcision had diminished you sexually, and you were probably not. I mean, is it fair to say that you were kind of upset about that and kind of regretted that choice at that point?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and I figured nothing else had worked to this point, and I'd spent so much money seeing a variety of doctors and specialists to see how they could help, and none of them offered anything other than, I think I had one offer me medication. So that's about it.
So you start restoring, and did you primarily use the TLC tugger, or did you use other devices and techniques as well?
Well, at the first point, I bought the basic tugger with the strap, and then a month into it, I went ahead and got a TLC X, which is bidirectional.
Right.
And so I was alternating using both of those devices, and then a year into it, I managed to stretch enough skin that I had to, for the TLC X, had to buy a larger pin. I also had to buy some additional extension foam to be able to stretch more skin. And then that got just way too uncomfortable because I was probably having in the flaccid state, probably like a 6.5-inch stretch. So literally your gland is in your body. And it was okay while it was on, but when I took it off, it ached horribly.
Right.
So I went back to the strap tugging, and I came up with a process to strap around my waist, kind of loop the strap under the butt cheeks to kind of keep some tension, and that way I could use it while I was working, because that was the biggest thing, to be able to have enough time to do it 5 days a week.
Would you wear that a couple hours a day, 1 hour at a time? What would be the time?
Well, I did that. I met with I see a naturopath, and my doctor was very fascinated by the whole thing. Being intact himself, he thought it was a great idea to do it. He actually said, skin tensile expansion is probably the best solution to try to restore versus trying surgeries and stuff.
Yeah.
So it's probably safer.
The surgeries are more risky, more expensive, and they don't, the quality of the result.
He just told me to be careful, don't do anything that hurts, and do it gradual. He said, start your first week, tug an hour each day for a week, each week add an hour. hour until you're doing, something comfortable. And of course, in the beginning, I got carried away, started doing 12, 13 hours, and started experiencing skin irritation and dryness. So I brought that down and started making sure I took breaks. I took 1 or 2 days off a week, and tried to stay between 8-9 hour range and not exceed that.
Oh, wow.
Because when you start doing 12 and 13,
what level of tension?
Really
would this be like high tension, low tension? If you're doing 8-9 hours, I imagine it wasn't that high.
I would say it was moderate. I didn't do it to a point where it was uncomfortable that I could wear it for a couple hours without releasing it. So if I could wear it, a good 2 hours without having to release the clip to take a break, I was good. So I would say it was pretty moderate to high tension, but not too high. Every time I've used really high tension, I don't last maybe 35, 40 minutes.
Right.
It's like this burning sensation on the skin that's like major relief when you take it off. It's like, oh, thank God.
So you're doing consistent tugging. I'm sure you had days off, but it sounds like you went pretty much every week, almost every day. How long did it take before you achieved where you're at now or your goal?
Well, I feel like it took the better part of the 4 years before I was at where I'm at today.
And this is flaccid coverage or erect coverage? What's the status?
Well, oddly, I was lucky enough because I had some coverage to start with. Within 6 months, I actually had soft coverage. It just wasn't reliable. I mean,
Okay.
A short little breeze could make the skin roll back. So it just was not reliable at all. So really it was the 4-year mark before there was enough skin growth. And this is my take on restoration. I tell guys when they ask me questions, I say, I really feel like you're not just growing skin. I feel like you're also training some of your shaft skin to act as foreskin. So it's kind of like a combination, from my point of view, of growing some skin, it's such slow growing skin, and using existing shaft skin to restore ourselves. So yeah, that's where. That's just what That's just.
Now, as you restored, did you notice gradual changes in sexual performance, or was there kind of like a threshold that you reached at some point where it seemed very different?
I did. On the forum, I don't know if you recall, but I actually captured on pictures, which I wasn't comfortable taking pictures because it was awkward.
Right.
But I did take pictures of when the skin sloughed off. I mean, I had tissue on the glands. Like I said, I started in July of 2012. By December, I had my first dekeratization experience. And
of the entire glands or just sections of it, maybe?
Entire, yeah, okay. Absolutely. I mean, you can look on the forum. I mean, it's captured there. It looked tragic. I mean, I woke up one morning and on my glands were little red bumps, and I told my wife, "Holy crap, I don't know what's going on." She's like, "Does it hurt?" I'm like, "No, let's just wait it out." By noon that day, I don't know where we were at, but we were somewhere. I went to a public restroom, went to the restroom, and the skin was just flaking off like a sunburn. And then I panicked, and I said, "I think I better go to the doctor." And then she said, "No," she said, "that's a good thing." And I'm like, "What do you mean?" And she was asking me again, "Does it hurt?" I said, "No, not at all." And she said, "That's a good thing. That tissue just bumping off." And by 5 o'clock that day, it was all gone.
And did you notice a change in sensitivity?
Right? Oh my God, it was crazy. And then that happened to me 2 more times in the next few weeks. Not nearly as big as the first time.
Oh, so you had like multiple layers coming off at different times, basically.
I did. It only happened 3 times, and they were a little bit smaller each the last 2 times. And from that point, that was where the change was. But I was lucky enough that when I started restoring, I was able to retain from day one.
Okay.
So I had enough tissue to start retaining immediately. So I was covered 24/7 from the time I started.
And for those who don't know, retaining is a process where you basically envelop your gland, your head, in your own skin, which most people can do. Sometimes it involves kind of poking it in, and then you use a piece of tape, or there's a device in Canada called a manhood, basically a silk cover. And when you do that, essentially your head is like you are uncut. Your head is surrounded in skin. Now, your skin's not long enough to do that unaided, but you kind of, I know for me, I never had the dekeratinization that you're describing, but I had a huge increase in sensitivity within weeks of starting to retain. So you saw very dramatic changes in conjunction with each of those dekeratinization events. And what about in terms of function, like getting the skin mobility back, moisture, lube, all that stuff? Do you see changes with all that? Or?
Yeah, the glands certainly improved, becoming more moist. Mobility of skin actually improved, but what I can tell you, having had intercourse intact, is that I really feel like the front arm band plays a big role in the glide movement, because as it stands now, I can get glide. It's not consistent. It's not consistent with every movement, which is fine. It doesn't ruin anything, but it was a lot more improved when I was intact, and I could literally feel the skin, going up and down, during the whole intercourse act.
So the skin itself was more sensitive when there's.
Well, I don't know if it was more sensitive, but the tightness of the band would force, the skin to go over the glands, on the out movement, and then when you go in, it would definitely roll. You could feel the sensation of it rolling up and down. And that doesn't happen consistently now. It does happen, during intercourse, but it's really inconsistent.
For those who are a little bit lost here, and I think there are even a lot of intact people who might be lost because they don't think about these things or they take it for granted. Like the tip of the foreskin is not just skin; it's got musculature in it. And it kind of has what people call a pucker, or even a second sphincter, and it's called the frontal band, where basically the skin will hug and I don't want to say pinch, but really hug the glands. And so when you are having sex or jerking off, it's going to hug on and off. And when you restore, that's one of the things that you can't really get back, because you're just elongating shaft skin that doesn't have that musculature, that doesn't have those nerve endings. So that's one of the things that is most difficult and currently not possible to change. So that is something that you notice the difference between restored and intact then.
Yes, it's definitely a difference. I mean, I've talked to a lot of restored people who say that they have it, but I'm not sure that they really know, because they never were intact and experienced that actual experience, which is significantly different. Like even if I get like 3 minutes during sex of it, feeling it moving, it's still not the same feeling that it was when I was intact. I really feel like that little elastic band at the end of the skin when I was intact contributed to making the entire act more pleasurable. I don't know how.
It's very difficult to convey that verbally, but like it was just erogenous, it was pleasurable. How would you describe just the feeling of the skin expanding and going was good, or like what?
Yeah, I mean, it is an additional pleasure that is just not there consistently. And so, I mean, that's why I say, when, like I said earlier, 90%, because there is still some loss, but I really feel blessed that, that I found this full opportunity to even restore, because it has improved our lives a lot, and it's made us happier. So it is a good thing, and I've tried to discourage people. I mean, I'm in a job now where I interact with a lot of people. It's just part of my job. And, when somebody's having a baby and they start letting me know they're having a boy, I just start educating as quickly as I can, sending them information so they don't do to their sons what so many people, will do.
Well, it's so tricky, because if you have a man who's circumcised at birth, he's never going to quote miss his frontal band. He's never going to have felt it. He's not going to know what he's missing, and so it's very easy for someone like that to underrate foreskin and just say, well, it's worthless. It's vestigial, or some people will say that it's just a cap for your head, and you don't really need a cap. And I mean, I think that belies how dynamic it is when you use it in sex. When you use it to masturbate, you're not just taking it off and then having sex. You're on and off, on and off, on and off. It's intimately involved in the entire process. But you don't know that if you're circumcised at birth.
No, you don't. And I've had guys tell me that you're lucky you got to choose to do it. You're lucky you got to experience child 5 years ago, and she had a little boy. And oddly, I've been able to discourage strangers and coworkers and people that I don't know very well, easier than my own family. And her husband happened to be circumcised, and apparently they wanted their son to look like dad, which I'm thinking, why do you want your child to look like dad? It's not like you guys are going to be naked
Right.
all together, all
And
all
comparing
the time.
penises, like, oh, Dad, let's compare penises and see,
Yeah, I mean, so it made no sense to me, so I did all my little education on them. I even went so far as to let him know. I met with him, he's not my blood relative, he's through marriage, but I let my nephew know the problems that it caused me and what I did and, what I've done to fix it. And he still chose to get his son done. I mean, they went ahead and did it when he was like 4 months old, which they clearly waited too long. And then they went ahead and did it. And I just thought, how could you do that after you had all this education? But it was their choice to make as a parent.
Well, that's the question then, isn't it? Because well, that's a whole other debate.
Legally it is. I mean,
yes.
Maybe morally it's not. And I tried to let my niece know. I think I made her feel really bad about it because I let her know, you are this child's mother. It is your job
to protect,
to make sure only the best for him, and take care of him. And now he's going to undergo a procedure that's going to be horrible for him the rest of his life. And she has really high anxiety, so it impacted her negatively that I said that to her.
And the thing is, if he was born in 1950, there would be a chance that he could kind of get through life and never really realize that there's such a thing as uncut dicks, never see one, never be aware. But that's no longer true. Right? The circumcision rates have fallen enough that if he's going to see uncut penises among his friends, and he's going to know about restoration and about intactivism because those have kind of become ever more conspicuous. So you're not going to be blissfully ignorant, because people are going to know, and so you're going to have to deal with the potential that one day your son is going to come and say, "Why did you do this to me?" And your explanation is going to be pretty crappy if you just said, "Well, we just wanted to."
Well, especially in this state, we've got, 70% of the boys being born are left intact anymore. So he's in a generation where it's not just Latinos that are left intact now. I mean, it is all different cultures and races. So
assuming that they still had communal showers, which is a whole other topic because they probably don't.
Yeah, I don't think they do. I know that when my kids were in school, they didn't have that. As a matter of fact, they weren't even required to participate in any kind of physical education stuff. It wasn't a requirement, which explains why a lot of people are really heavy these days.
Yeah, well, and it's interesting because you'll hear parents use that as justification. I don't want my kid to look weird in the showers, and A, there's enough uncut people now that he wouldn't be in a minority, but B, they don't require communal showering hardly ever anymore, so the chances that would be that it's clearly a generation gap where a parent thinks their kid is going to have to deal with that.
Correct.
Well, I know that you're pressed for time. I don't want to overtake you. So, are there any other final comments, any other final thoughts you want to put out there? Please feel free. You've got a platform to say whatever you like.
I really can't think of anything other than, if there are parents out there thinking about doing this, just, really research it. It really isn't a necessary procedure, and it's no different than anybody who is cut. I mean, somebody who is actually circumcised can have some health-related issues as a result of the procedure, no different than I've known people who've had babies, if they don't change the diaper timely, fecal matter can get inside and, inside the urethra and cause some problems. And, those same families are like, well, the doctor's saying that we need to get him circumcised. He keeps getting UTIs. Like, no, just change his diapers routinely so he's not getting bacteria where it should be, because that could happen to a child who is uncircumcised as well. You're not changing the diaper timely. So I would just say research it. You don't need to do this procedure. There are, young boys who are intact that do have health problems, but, those are isolated incidents. It's not like a high rate of problems. And, I personally never had any kind of issues when I was intact at all, other than all the mental ones that I created.
I'll even talk to intact guys, and they'll say, like, well, cut is cleaner. And I was like, well, did you ever have a problem yourself? I'm like, no, they never did. And so it's like, well, why? You know better. Like, you you know better, and yet you will still parrot because that's the claim. Oh, well, it's cleaner, and there are all these, health benefits. And again, if you dig down on any of those particular health benefits, they tend up to be either completely not there or exaggerated to the point where circumcising everybody to prevent one infection makes no sense. One infection that's treatable by bacteria or antibiotics. So, all right, Dan. Well, if you don't have anything else, I do want to value your time and not keep you. So if there's nothing else, I just want to say thank you for you have a really unique perspective. There's not that many men who are circumcised in adulthood. I mean, there's some, but not many. Most of them are psychologically wedded to the point that they aren't going to really question it. And as you say, some of the main disadvantages don't come for 5, 6, 7 years. So you can have somebody who was circumcised last year say, I feel fine. Yeah, you're circumcised for life, not for 1 year. And then to have you restored on top, I mean, I honestly, you're the only person I know who has experienced all of those stages. I know that there are other ones, but it's so rare. I mean, we're probably talking about a couple dozen in the United States or something like that. So very unique perspective, and one that I think a lot of people would be interested in hearing about. So I really appreciate you giving me your time for that.
Oh, absolutely. And I just thought before we take off, I did have about a year ago, I had a 25-year-old male who was experiencing constant infections on his glands, and they described them. I mean, I think they diagnosed one as Bolantis. The second one was a yeast infection. And so what he met with his doctor the final time, they met like on a Monday, and that doctor was scheduling a circumcision for that Friday. And so I said to him, David, why are you going to do this? And he said, well, doctor says I need to. He said, Dan, it really hurts bad. And I said, there's got to be, I said, it's not typical for men to get yeast infections, and, Bolantis can definitely happen, but I said, it's not very common. There's got to be something, it's got to be, you got to find the source of the problem. And so, he's a little overweight, so I asked him, I said, have you had your physical, have you been checked, your sugar levels, everything? And he said, no, I hadn't. So he asked the doctor to run his labs, and they did a, AC1, which looks at your sugar levels, and he was pre-diabetic. So, and diabetes is definitely a symptom of yeast infection. So I said, so now that you know what that is, why don't you focus on that so you don't have the other issue? And I went ahead and shared with him about the stuff I shared with you today on this call, and he was really pleased. I mean, he recognized that was going to be really damaging. He got a medication that cost $70, which, our insurance doesn't cover a lot of that. So he paid $70. He thought that was outrageous. I said, well, how much do you think you're going to spend on surgery?
Yeah.
And then how about the damage that's after that? And so this man listened to me, and it's funny. He will randomly joke with me, hey, you saved my life.
You saved my foreskin. Yeah, I mean,
my sexual life anyway.
It's fascinating. There's a pathology among some American doctors, not all, including the one that you talked to apparently, who discouraged you, to basically overprescribe. Circumcision as a necessary surgery is quite rare. There are situations where it might be necessary, and other situations where maybe it's not necessary, but it might not be a bad option. But we have doctors who are prescribing 4-year-olds for having phimosis. And it's like a 4-year-old is probably not going to be able to retract his foreskin naturally, and to say, oh, he has phimosis, it needs to come off, is absurd. And yet we have doctors saying that, or if you have any infection at all, if you have any issue, whatever, and even if there are other solutions, if you have phimosis, you can use graduated discs, you can do stretching, and you can open up the opening so that it works. But how many doctors are ever going to suggest that? They're going to say, no, cut it off, cut it off, cut it off. I've heard stories of kids who, they have a sore throat, and the doctor's like, you should get circumcised. It's like, I have a sore throat. What? So I don't know if there's probably some kind of psychological, cultural, medical bias that doesn't, again, it won't affect all doctors, but it affects a lot. And when you have a doctor with authority over you telling you need this, it's very hard for a lot of people to reject that. And I've heard stories.
Well, no, we grew up believing that doctors know best, and for a doctor to say that a 4-year-old child has phimosis, clearly that doctor should be ashamed of himself for not being educated. I mean, they don't teach it in American medical
schools. They teach how to cut it off, and that's it. They don't teach the function. They don't teach how to. It's just, this is a part of the body, and the only reason it exists is to be removed. from an infant. You know, that's the
Yeah.
that's the way the American medical culture looks at it, including right now. This is what they teach in medical school right now. So it's a bias, and people should recognize that you know, as skilled as doctors are, and as you know, as good as they are for many of other things, there is actually a cultural bias here. Um, and there's also other incentives, like they don't want to admit culpability. They don't want to admit they've been doing something that's maybe, you know, ethically questionable at the very least. And so they have a psychological reason to double down and be like, this is good, this is good.
They do. I think there's a part of them that doesn't really care either. I mean, probably if they are in that same boat, they don't really know the difference, so they just don't care. So they're like, yeah, it's just better.
Yeah,
they're very casual about that.
And there's just the banality of they make money off of it. You know, I mean, it's a procedure they can charge for. That's not necessarily sinister, but you understand the incentives there. So it's good. Congratulations on convincing somebody not to do it. I know I've convinced a few parents not to do it to their kids. I have a buddy at the gym who I sauna with. And he's got a Jewish wife, and he's like, I'm definitely not going to allow this for our kids should they have a son. You know, based on what I'd said. And it's very also interesting too. A lot of people, they don't talk about it, but as soon as you get to the point where you can talk about it, it's clear that they've thought about it. You know, they always wonder, what, this is weird, what would it be like? But it's so taboo to even have a discussion, which is why I value your openness. And it's not, you know, there's things that I feel more comfortable talking about, more, I don't know, traditional subjects, but I think this is an important topic. It's very important to the identity of like every man, and the relationship he has with every woman too, and any partners. So I think it's a conversation that's really not just worth having, but really needs to be had. And like I said, you have such a unique perspective there. I mean, you mentioned before that you have actually met other people who like you know, restored after having been intact, but it's got to be what, like 5, 6, something like that.
It's less than that. I think I've met like 3 guys, and that was on the forum. Just wanted to see if there were other people who had experienced what I had, and I was lucky enough to meet a couple of guys that had. I mean, they all had it done between ages of 20 and 28. The 3 guys that I met, and we were able to chat and just kind of, yes, I have that, yes, that. So it was just kind of, it was more like just a kind of a confirmation. So,
right.
You know, it really wasn't just, you know what, this happened to me, and yeah, you know, it's real, not just to me. There's other people, you know, who unfortunately have to live with that choice.
It's a high price for a unique perspective.
Yes.
But hopefully by you sharing it, we can help, you know, persuade some other people not to make the same choice and to make better choices. All right, Dad. Well, if you don't have anything else, you know, I know you've got a busy day ahead of you, so I think that'll be it. So thank you very much.
All right. Well, thank you for your time and the opportunity to, you know, share this with folks.
Oh, it's my pleasure.